Hey guys, Eli here. Hello and welcome back. This is part 3 of my Australian metal retrospective where I discuss some of my favorite Australian metal albums. Today we're doing 2009 through 2022. There will be a fourth video where I will include honorable mentions, and I also plan on spotlighting some of the more important record labels that released all this great metal, but that might be a separate video. Anyways, I hope you enjoy. Nexus are one of Australia's most unique bands from the underground, playing a blend of melodic death metal with very challenging song structures and advanced musicianship. The only band I can compare them to would be maybe Into Eternity from the US. Their sole 2009 album, The Paradise Complex, is worth seeking out if you can find it, and if you are into original sounding progressive death metal, because this only pretty much is recommended for the more forward thinking death metal fans. I'm also adding that the album clocks in at under half an hour with 8 tracks, so they do pack a lot of punch into their songs, with none really reaching the 8-minute mark. Midnight Odyssey had one of the most promising demos in black metal with Firmament from 2009. It was a master class in ambient-sounding black metal fit for traversing the cosmos. Forming in 2007 and releasing a ton of material since then, this demo is, for me, their finest hour. Midnight Odyssey has almost always been a solo project led by Dis Pater, who has helmed a few others as well, but nothing has grabbed me the way that Midnight Odyssey did. Around this time, I feel that a lot of stellar black metal was coming out all around the globe, but Firmament still stood out to me, and it is a work that holds up to this day and could even use another repressing, if you ask me. Shackles play a very Australian-sounding death thrash metal with some black metal in the mix, and hell, even some good old-fashioned traditional heavy metal elements for good measure, maybe even a little punk rock in some of the riffing. Shackles really do have their own sound, though. I can hear fellow countrymen Destroyer 666 on the soul full-length Traitors Gate from 2009. I can also hear a little bit of maybe Toxic Holocaust from the US. One thing that might make Shackles stand out from the Wolfpack is their excellent songwriting. The songs all seem to stand on their own, well written, well played, and catchy. Shackles were active from 2000 to 2009, and sadly we won't hear any more from them, but luckily this album can usually be found really cheap on Discogs. The 2010s would see an unearthing of primal, cavernous-sounding death metal with a large number of bands, one of which would be Grave Upheaval, formed by members of Portal and Impetuous Ritual. You can hear bits of both of those bands, but Grave Upheaval had a sound of its own. Forming in 2008 and still active, I have always preferred the 2010 debut demo Grave Upheaval. The music here is just absolutely primal sounding, slow and murky, with everything sounding fairly audible. Perfect production for this type of music. Check this band out if you like Caveman Cult and other bands like that. Vomitor are one of my favorite bands playing the black death thrash type metal. Forming in 1999, my go-to album from them is typically Devil's Poison from 2010. I would describe it as sounding like something that might have came out of Brazil or Germany back in 1987, back when the lines that separated genres were blurred or non-existent. I would call them a thrash band first and foremost, but death and black metal help make up the Poisonous formula. Almost all the riffs are thrash-based, with the vocals being more of a heavily reverbed black metal raspy bark, not too far removed from early Sodom. 80s death metal can be heard in the crunch of some of the riffs, too. Fans of Sodom, early Sarcophago, and even stuff like Midnight should find Vomitor's music completely mandatory. Assaulter formed back in 2004 to play classic Australian-sounding black thrash metal. Following in the footsteps of Destroyer 666 and Gospel of the Horns, Assaulter had their own sound, maybe more similar to early Atomizer or even Adorior from the UK. They released a few demos and an EP before releasing their debut full-length in 2008. However, I prefer the 2011 follow-up Boundless. Boundless is an excellent ripping thrash album with classic Australian-style black thrash vocals. Just like with the Shackles album previously, the songwriting on Boundless is varied, and every song is a standout. Something that is, sometimes missing nowadays. Sadly, Assaulter would call it quits the very next year after releasing Boundless. Ignivomous are one of the best death metal bands ever to come out of Australia, and are just underrated in general. Forming in 2006, they were one of the many awesome metal bands storming the gates in the early 2000s until 2012 or so. They wasted no time releasing one of the best death metal albums of that era in 2009, and I highly recommend it. My personal favorite, though, is the 2012 sophomore release Contragenesis. Ignivomous stood apart from the more murky death metal bands of the time and went for a more demigod slumber of soul and eyes or mid-period incantation. Don't get me wrong, though, they very much have their own sound. Kill for Satan were a band I never really saw mentioned much. Combining death thrash with black metal and having Uri Ward of Armored Angel on guitar and vocals as a secret weapon, they really had a cool and unique sound, blending those individual sounds masterfully, even having a triple vocal attack. My personal favorite release from them would be the 2012 sophomore full-length The Final Conflict. Quite an overlooked album, at least so far as I know. Kill for Satan would only leave behind 2 albums in a 10-plus year period, but both are truly ripping efforts, very much worth your time. The now sadly defunct Backyard Mortuary would only leave behind 1 album, the 2012 banger Lure of the Occult. But if you're only going to make 1 album, make it good, and these guys did exactly that. They play a very thick and riffy, bottom-heavy death metal with absolutely monstrous vocals. The coolest thing about Backyard Mortuary is that they don't remind me too much of any one particular band. They kind of roll with their influences and sound completely unique, something I can't say for every younger band these days. If you like 90s American death metal of all varieties, track down Lure of the Occult. Nocturnal Graves was formed in 2004 by members of Hunter's Moon and Denouncement Pyre, both of which are featured in this series. They play a type of Australian black thrash with heavy doses of death metal in a way that sets them apart from Destroyer 666 or Vomitor. To me, I hear a strong Angel Corpse influence. The band is helmed by Nuclear Exterminator, handling vocals on all releases, lead and rhythm guitars on most releases, and even drums and bass when he needs to. Nocturnal Graves are one of the best bands to come out of Australia, and despite only forming in 2004, will go down as one of the greats. Along with Ignivomous, Altars are one of the best death metal bands to come out of Australia, even despite having a much smaller discography. Alter's death metal formula is, however, completely different, opting for dissonance and atmosphere instead of pure old school brutality. Not nearly as weird as Portal, think more along the lines of later era Gorguts and Morbid Angel, while still having plenty of their own originality. Vocals are that of a Lovecraftian monstrosity conjured up by David Vincent. The riffs are off kilter, swirling, tempos range from slow to fast pace, and everywhere in between, really. The drums are quite technical and very fun to pay attention to. I think that the Paramnesia album from 2013 has potential to reach cult status. Temple Nightside play a very evil and atmospheric black death metal with doom touches, not unlike their New Zealand brothers Vassifor, who they have shared members with. Grave Upheaval and Impetuous Ritual are good comparisons, as are Void Meditation Cult and even Drawing Down the Moon era Beherit. Temple Nightside have been incredibly consistent, both in terms of quality and the fact that they had pretty much a release at least every other year since their 2010 formation. I'll recommend the very evil and doomy 2013 debut full-length, Condemnation. While not the busiest band, having 4 releases between 2011 and 2013, and really nothing since, I chose to include Vilifier based on the strength of the 2013 EP Ritual Obscuration. 4 songs clocking in at under 22 minutes, its vile savagery will leave you wanting more. This is not just another barbaric black death metal release. The tempo changes really keep my attention, going from mid-paced devastation to slower, lurching atmospheric passages. You will never be bored listening to this EP. Doomed and Disgusting is a solo project by Dave Slave of Sadistic Execution fame. Dave here plays a type of black doom metal, slow, heavy, and evil sounding, but in a pretty unique way. The vocals are very processed sounding because the human vocal cords don't sound like this. I only own the Murder in the Dark single from 2014, which is only 1 song, but it's a very cool song and a taste of what you might get should you seek out more Doomed and Disgusting. And on the plus side, you can get this track on 7-inch vinyl with Sadistic Execution's Suspiral, a 1991 demo, on the other side. Impetuous Ritual are known for sharing members with Grave Upheaval and Portal. Oddly enough, their music indeed reflects this, sounding like a combination of the two. This is cavernous, primal-sounding death metal of the highest order. The band even dresses as cavemen during live shows, which kinda just says it all. The music is murky, but produced well enough to dig through all the layers. I think that this is one of the best death metal bands from the current Australian scene, and I highly recommend the 2014 sophomore album, Unholy Congregation of Hypocritical Ambivalence. Denouncement Pyre are made up from Nocturnal Graves, Hunter's Moon, and Funerary Pit members, so there's absolutely no chance of this band not killing it, and they completely do. They play a brand of black death metal that is maybe a touch more black metal sounding than most of their Australian contemporaries, full of great riffs like pretty much all the others. On the 3rd album, Black Sun Unbound, I hear some riffs that remind me of Wardaemonic, and it totally works within the Denouncement Pyre sound. It also makes them stand out just a bit from their peers, kind of like I said earlier. Inverloch are famous for having half of disembowelment amongst their ranks. although I imagine they probably don't completely want to be known for that. They actually started as Dusk before changing to Inverloch the same year. They haven't been the busiest band so far, but the 2016 debut full length is some very cool doom death metal that is only a little bit reminiscent of Disembowelment, since I'm sure they did not really want the pressure that comes with returning after a long time. Distance Collapsed is maybe more standard doom death than Disembowelment was, but I don't mean that as to take anything away from the album. This is just a crushing masterpiece of doom death metal that should be heard by everyone, whether they're a fan of Disembowelment or not. Suicide play a type of old-style death metal reminiscent of, let's say, early Pestilence, maybe a little Ripping Corpse, stuff like that. They hung around for about 7 years until calling it quits, but left a decent amount of material behind. I suggest starting with the 2016 Soul full-length Immortalized in Suffering. It's a nice, quick blast of nasty old-style death metal that I think most fans of the style will appreciate. Make sure to check out the cool artwork by legendary Finnish artist Turkka Rantanen, who was responsible for great album covers for bands like Adramelech, Demigod, and Demolish. Ichor got my attention in 2018 for having two original members of Nazul, and we all know how I feel about Nazul at this point. They had a demo in 1993, but then nothing else until 2018 when they released a great album called God of Thunder, God of War. Here you have original and now current Nazul vocalist Diablor and Wraith on guitar, the man responsible for guitars and the majestic keyboards on Nazul's material. For me, this band could not go ignored. It does sound similar to Nazul, not as symphonic sounding as Iconoclast. It's kind of raw like Totem or Black Seed with Diablor's signature hellish sounding vocals. This is mandatory for Nazul fans. For the sake of diversity, let's add some Doom to the list. I don't personally know a lot of Australian Doom, but a few years ago I discovered Witch Skull, who formed in 2014, and what got them on my radar were two things. First was the Armored Angel connection with Joel Green on drums. The second was the fact that they are signed to Rise Above Records. I have to talk about the very Dax Riggs-esque vocals of Marcus, aka Merlin. He steals the show on 2018 album Coven's Will, wailing and oozing charm all over this thing. That is not to say that he completely outshines everyone else, as the band is really tight, and you get plenty of groove and Black Sabbath type riffing. I believe it was Simon of the Explosive Action YouTube channel that got Horizonous on my radar. This band is full of Australian veterans, and here they play a very cavernous, nasty, doom-type death metal. I can't think of a perfect comparison sound-wise, which is a good thing. I can hear a little autopsy in some of the riffs on the 2019 debut full-length A Culinary Cacophony. The vocals are just utterly disgusting. In fact, just like the album cover might suggest, this album just oozes vile nastiness. In that sense, it sounds perfect. This band is just scratching that itch for me, and I highly suggest them. Illimitable Dolor was a band I felt I had to include, mainly because they remind me of all the melodic doom death metal I listened to in the early 2000s when a lot of those bands seemed to be popping up. Just think about the band like Daylight Dies, and that's, in a way, kind of what you get here with Illimitable Dolor. They might even venture in a funeral doom territory on occasion. I have been listening to the 2019 sophomore album Leaden Light, and I like it quite a bit. It reminds me a bit of classic funeral doom like Stormcrow Fleet by Skepticism, and then also melodic doom death at the same time. The atmosphere is crushingly beautiful, and I highly recommend it. Mongrel's Cross formed during the massive boom of metal bands appearing around 2009. There was a new wave of Australian metal bands, and they were out for blood. Mongrel's Cross released two very good albums in their own style of black thrash metal. However, the 2020 third album titled Arcana, Scrying, and Revelation would grab my attention, especially hearing that Prescriptor McGovern from Absu was joining the ranks. This has become my go-to Mongrel's Cross album. I really enjoy the added melody via traditional heavy metal flavors used effectively and merging with their brand of black thrash metal. Wardaemonic play a unique brand of modern black metal, and I don't mean that as a bad thing. I've been following them for quite a while at this point, and they formed in 2005, and while I liked the first few releases, I kind of forgot to pay attention to what they would continue to do. Well, I'm happy to report that the fourth album from 2020 titled Acts of Repentance is very good. Wardaemonic play a dissonant type of black metal, maybe similar to the current Icelandic scene. They certainly stand apart from what other Australian bands are doing, except maybe the band Norse. If you like Deathspell Omega, you might actually really dig Wardaemonic. Ravenous Dusk are yet another band with ties to Nazul, and I simply must hear them all. Sign me up for fucking anything and everything that these guys do. Forming in 2021 by Balam and Wraith from Nazul, Drowning the Light, and many, many more, there is only a 2022 demo so far titled The Dead of Night. This is comfort food for the Nazul fan, and I really, really hope we get more from them. And here's another band pointed out to me by Simon from the Explosive Action YouTube channel. Forming in 2015, I'm going to recommend the 2022 sophomore album Adorned in Ruin. I can't sit here and tell you it's their best album, but I can tell you that it's a goddamn excellent album. Murky death metal with maybe a splash of black metal. There is a unique atmosphere here that makes it unique in its own right. This album should easily please fans of Immolation and maybe even Portal, just to name a few, but fans of those bands will probably dig the dissonant, angular riffing, the impressive overall songwriting, and the otherworldly type vocals. Like Portal, Adorned in Ruin sounds like a Lovecraftian fever dream.